Grace Mallory had always lived fast. She was the kind of woman who did everything in a hurry. Her job as an ER nurse demanded it, and her life outside of work was no less chaotic. Hiking every other weekend, kickboxing 3 nights a week, always chasing the adrenaline that made her feel alive. That was before the crash. It happened on a cold March evening on the I-90, slick with black ice and regrets. The semi jackknifed across 2 lanes, and Grace's car crumpled like foil. The doctors said it was a miracle she survived at all. Her pelvis had shattered, both femurs fractured. Her left ankle? Reconstructed was the word they used, like a building being rebuilt from rubble. Grace didn't remember much from those first few weeks, just a haze of pain and painkillers. But what came after was worse, the long, grinding reality of recovery. Now at 36, she was learning to walk all over again. Each morning, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her crutches like they were prison bars. She hated them. They were the symbol of everything she had lost: her independence, her strength, her identity. Her physical therapist, Jamal, was relentlessly optimistic, the kind of man who could cheerfully talk about small victories while her legs trembled under her own weight. "Come on, Grace. 2 steps today. That's the goal." 2 steps? She'd scoffed. "I used to run 6 miles before work." "And now you'll walk 2 steps, he'd replied calmly. "That's where we start." So she did, and it was hell. The first time she stood without the crutches, it felt like someone was sawing through her bones with dull blades. Her body didn't trust her anymore. Her legs wobbled like broken tree branches in a storm. But she did it. Then she did it again. Every day she added a step. Some days she cursed, some days she cried, and some days she collapsed into her couch and didn't move for hours. But she never quit. 3 months in, Grace walked from her living room to the front porch, 12 careful steps without crutches. The wind smelled like rain and new beginnings. Her neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, saw her through the window and gave her a proud thumbs up. She didn't smile. She wept. Not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough now to feel it all. At night, Grace still had nightmares about the crash. In some dreams, she was trapped in the car, unable to move. In others, she was floating above the scene, watching strangers pull her broken body from the wreckage. But slowly, those dreams began to shift. One night, she dreamed she was running again. Not fast, not far, but she was moving. And when she woke up, instead of despair, she felt hope. 6 months after the crash, Grace stood in front of the full-length mirror in her hallway. No crutches, no brace. Just her, standing tall on her own 2 legs. She looked thinner. There were new lines around her eyes, and a scar that ran from her hip to her knee. But her eyes were fierce, alive. She took a breath, and she walked. Not for anyone else. Not for the doctors or the neighbors or the people who said she was lucky to survive. She walked for the woman she was before and the woman she was becoming, step by step. Grace Mallory was done running, but damn it, she was walking again. Grace never thought walking could make her feel so powerful. 12 steps had turned into hallways, then sidewalks, and finally short strolls around the block. She still carried a cane when she was tired, and stairs were like cliffs she eyed with suspicion. But she was moving. Her body ached every night, but it wasn't the agony of before. It was the ache of use, of effort. It was the reminder that her legs were hers again. Still, recovery had left a different kind of scar, one that wasn't visible in X-rays or MRIs. She didn't feel like the same person. Before the accident, her life had been defined by movement and purpose. Now everything felt quiet, slower. She was still on medical leave from the hospital, and every time she thought about going back, her chest tightened. It wasn't just fear, it was doubt. Would she be strong enough? Quick enough? Would people look at her differently now? Would they see the limp before they saw her? Walking through the emergency room doors made Grace feel like a ghost. Everything looked the same. The pale green walls, the bitter smell of antiseptic, the hum of activity. But she wasn't the same. "Grace," someone called from across the room. It was Tanya, one of the trauma nurses she used to work with. "God, it's good to see you." Grace smiled, but her voice caught. "Hey, just visiting." They sat in the break room with lukewarm coffee and swapped stories. Grace listened more than she talked. Her fingers twitched every time a code blue was called over the intercom. She still felt it all, the urgency, the pressure, the pull. But she also noticed something else. She wasn't scared. Not like she thought she'd be. She wasn't the same nurse she had been before, but maybe that was a good thing. Instead of jumping back into 12-hour trauma shifts, Grace started small. She volunteered part-time in the hospital's physical therapy wing, helping patients who were just beginning their own journeys. She showed them how to sit up again, how to balance, how to fight through the hopelessness. One patient, a teenage boy named Aaron, reminded her of herself, angry, withdrawn, convinced he'd never walk again. "You don't have to believe in yourself today," she told him. "You just have to try." Belief comes later. That was the day he took his first step. 10 months after the crash, Grace stood at the starting line of a local 5K charity walk. She wasn't racing. She wasn't even sure she could finish. But she was going to try. The path wound through a wooded park. Children dashed ahead, dogs trotted on leashes, and friends walked in clumps of laughter and sweat. Grace walked alone, steady and slow. People passed her. That used to bother her. Not anymore. At the 2-mile mark, her left leg throbbed like fire. She paused at a bench. A volunteer offered her a ride in the medical cart. She declined. It wasn't about the finish line. It was about walking toward it. When she finally crossed it, red-faced, limping, and soaked with sweat, she didn't raise her arms. She didn't cry. She just smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't recovering anymore. She was living,